Did you watch Saturday Night Live? You know, when it was, it's still on TV now, isn't it? It still exists.
It is. I think this might be the 50th year, maybe last year was the 50th year. Yeah. So I used to watch it a lot as a kid, and it was pretty late to stay up because it was 11:30 to 1 in the morning here.
Whoa!
I can't stay awake that late. I'm like everyone else. I watch the opening bits and maybe some of the best stuff on YouTube. That's it.
Yes, I didn't realize it was really on that late. They should call it Sunday morning, shouldn't they?
Yes, 2/3 of it takes place on Sunday morning, and it has for 50 years. So
I want my money back.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Two Real Cinema Club. I'm James Ruzicka.
And I am Andres Lorente. And on the Two Real Cinema Club, we watch a couple of films, one new to the theater or to the streaming platforms, and we compare it to an older film that we think pairs well. So these films should complement each other. This week, James, tell them what we saw.
This week, this is one of those great weeks on the Two Real Cinema Club where I feel like I've watched the same film twice. So congruent are these films. I've been waiting to use the word congruent in casual conversation for a long time. We have watched Saturday Night, which is the brand new Jason Reitman film, detailing supposedly maybe a semi-fictionalized, fantastical 90 minutes before the very first broadcast of the very first Saturday Night Live in 1975. And we are comparing it to 2006's A Prairie Home Companion, Robert Altman's last film, wasn't it?
It was.
Which is about the final night, the closing night of Garrison Keillor's sort of semi-fictionalized, semi-real radio show of the same name. So a beginning and an ending, two live entertainments, more or less told in real time. I've watched the same film two times.
Yeah, it made it easy. I felt like this. I needed an easy week of viewing, and it made it kind of easy. I
think both these films go down pretty easy. Yeah, I agree.
And you could do a synopsis of either one, and it would more or less cover. So, I mean, if we're confused about who's going to talk about which film, it doesn't matter. This week, it just doesn't matter. Nothing matters this week.
I've got to ask you, we were talking before we started recording about Saturday Night Live. It's not. We had our own version of Saturday Night Live, which could not be called Saturday Night Live, presumably due to some kind of international copyright agreement. So we had Saturday Live, I think it was called. But you are someone who actually watched the actual Saturday Night Live?
Yeah, certainly not the first couple of seasons, but by 1979-80, I think I was watching. I remember the farewell for the 1980 cast, which was sort of a lot of the original players, or not ready for primetime players. Is that what they were? Yeah, not ready. Yeah, I think so. And then into the 80s, compared to those early guys, the next groups of casts were not quite as strong. And once I got out of high school, I didn't watch it anymore. So I'd say, the first 8-10 years at most, I saw it a lot. And I haven't seen it much in those years since, because as you get older, you go to bed a little earlier, and you're not as drunk as you used to be. And I think the sobriety makes it a little less funny, maybe. I don't know.
Well, even before watching this film, I was worried. I'll give you the synopsis in a minute. But when you first suggested that we watch these films, I was trying to think of like an appropriate metaphor. You know how I like an extended, difficult to believe metaphor. Yeah. So I was imagining it's a little bit like, I felt like I'd been approached to judge a Sri Lankan pop star lookalike competition. As if I'd just been suggested, well, you can judge this, but I don't know what any Sri Lankan pop stars look like. Oh, you'll be fine. So I was rather worried that I was going to watch a film which was all about some of the top names in television from the 1970s. And you know what? I just wouldn't know any of them. And I wouldn't be able to tell whether they were good impersonations or not. And none of it would really make any sense.
Yeah.
But happily, that's not the case.
No.
Partly because most of these 1970s comedians then went on to become Hollywood stars.
Exactly.
And partly because that's not the important bit, I think, is what I've taken home. Shall I tell you the story, and then I'll kind of elaborate?
Yeah, you better tell the story.
Such as it is. So it's the evening of October the 11th, 1975. And aspiring television producer Lorne Michaels is scraping together a chaotic and ramshackle cast and crew for the first performance of Saturday Night Live, or Saturday Night as it was called until 1977, on NBC. So the story is told in real time. It's the final 90 minutes before broadcast. And it sees appearances of likenesses of every 1970s TV comedian that you can think of. So we have Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase, Gilda Radner, John Belushi, Andy Kaufman, George Carlin, Jim Henson, and more. The list goes on and on. All played by actors who look a bit like them, maybe don't look quite so much like them, but I recognise most of them. But the running order for the show is in tatters. The comedians are in rebellion. The sponsors are confused. The head of talent at NBC is sceptical. And with the threat of the whole show being pulled at the last minute to be replaced by a tape of the Johnny Carson show, can Michaels pull everyone together to make television history? Or will John Belushi bring the whole show crashing to the ground?
Ooh, you ended with questions.
That's how it works. I think we've established that's what you got to do.
Yeah.
Always be asking questions.
But I feel like I'm on a quiz show or something. Then I have to start giving answers to your questions. I didn't write them all down or anything.
I'm going to cut to the chase, which is just that I thought this film was actually pretty wonderful. It's had largely lukewarm reviews.
Yeah.
I think The Guardian gave it a 1 out of 5. And they really, really hated it. And I thought it was tremendously entertaining. I thought it was really pretty terrific. Now, in part, I'm a bit biased because I was watching this film about trying to corral comedians into performing a show together, thinking, I've lived this life.
Yes, you have. Yeah.
At about 5% of the scale of the show that we see on the screen. But so for about a year, I ran a comedy venue. So I did stand up for about 3 years. From about sort of 1999 to 2002, something like that. And for a year, I ran a venue. It was on Charing Cross Road. It was in the basement of a cafe. And the comedy night was called Cool Eddie's on a Friday night. And so I ran the venue. I booked the acts. I stood on the pavement with a sign saying Comedy Tonight.
Oh, wow.
I was the MC. I was the producer. I was the accountant. I was the hospitality director. I was everything. And the first night we did the show, we had like sort of 4 people in the audience. But by Christmas of that year, every Friday night we would pack it out.
Nice.
I think, not because I was the world's greatest promoter, but just because it was running up to Christmas and people wanted to go out and have fun.
Yeah.
So every Friday night, we would pack out the venue, and it was great fun. I say pack it. I mean, it was basically a fire trap. It was like this little pokey room on Charing Cross Road. If you had, I think our record was about 60 or 70 people.
Jeez.
And that was shoulder to shoulder. But 60 or 70 people in a little room, 4 comedians, 5 comedians, 6 comedians, about that. It used to be a very fun evening.
Yeah.
But also, it was chaos. And trying to get comedians to stick to time, trying to get comedians to turn up, having to turn away the comedians who would sometimes turn up and say, any chance of doing a few minutes, when the bill is already full.
Yeah.
Having to deal with the rowdy audience. It's high pressure, a lot of fun. So I recognised quite a lot of what happens in this film, and most of what happens in this film is kind of chaos.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I questioned the reality of a lot of the stuff that happens in this film, and there's this unfamiliar level of suspending of disbelief that you have to embrace in this film. So I definitely did wonder about that. I think it's not a 1-star film. That's unkind. In The Guardian. Oh my goodness. This is for me, I enjoyed it. It was, it doesn't go on too long. So it's definitely on this compressed timeline, allegedly the sort of true timeline. So it runs, an hour and 40 or something like that.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I wasn't thrilled or overwhelmed by it. I didn't think it was amazing, but I think this is a very good, non-violent, superhero or action hero film. This is just a nice story told pretty well. And it's occasionally funny. I didn't find it I didn't fall down laughing or anything like that. There were a couple moments where I was very, very entertained, but there's something about it as well. I don't know if we need to. No, we don't need to hit the spoiler bill just yet. But I found like this film depends a lot on disorientation. And it starts with all these whirling cameras from the very beginning. So you feel, and I think you're supposed to feel that because you're sort of really getting the whole perspective from Lorne Michaels. He's in more or less every shot. It kind of just follows him around for an hour and 30, hour and 40 minutes. And I felt his nausea. It was crazy. There were times when I just was stressed out and nauseous, and I think that's exactly how I was supposed to feel. So it succeeds on that level, and some theater goers might not like being nauseous. I'm not sure, but definitely you get that energy. You get that energy. I think it's overplayed a little bit, but you got to make it interesting in theater or in film, I should say. And I think that's what they do. They definitely make it a very sort of clippy, pacey, an hour and a half. I mean, I would question the veracity of much of the story, but.
Well, I'm guessing that it's about sort of 4 or 5 months worth of story that is compressed into a real time 90 minutes.
Yeah.
I would hope that the real show, I'm sure it probably was disorganized and it was chaotic, but not entirely that chaotic, I think.
Yeah, precisely.
It's worth talking a little bit about the opening image, which is one of the lessons I've learned from you, one of the many lessons. So, opening image of this film, I found, probably more disorientating even than the rest of the film, because it's a TV at what I thought was a party, although looking back on it now, I think we are focusing on a TV which is playing in the background in the sponsor's room at the TV studio.
Yeah, it could be something.
So I think you just see a whole bunch of ankles and knees, people milling about, drinking and chatting, while on this television, which is what we, the audience, are watching, we are seeing the comedians' audition tapes.
Yeah.
So we're just watching, all these people who would then go on to become established comic figures, recognized across the country. We're seeing their audition tapes for the show. And I'm guessing the movie, again, it's setting out its stall, that the movie is like an audition for Saturday Night Live itself. I wrote in my notes here, this show is an audition for a new type of entertainment, or at least it thinks it is. That the film, Lorne Michaels in the film, is trying to suggest that what he's doing is revolutionary. Yeah. His kind of producer tells him, don't use the revolutionary word. Don't tell people that what you're doing is revolutionary. But he really believes that it is. Is it revolutionary? I think the other film that we watch for this week probably demonstrates that it kind of isn't. It's recycling that sort of variety show idea with a little bit more modernity and chaos. But it's something new, and it's a punt on a Saturday night. And I think that's the main message, I think, of the film. At least it's trying to convey the excitement and the danger and the fear and the thrill of a big punt like this. It's a punt, isn't it?
It is. And I think it's probably related to the fact that previously in radio and even early television, I think a lot of stuff was done live. And then you get into this boring area probably of the 60s and earlier 70s, when everything was recorded and it didn't feel very natural or spontaneous at all. So then it's revolutionary, but it's basically revolutionary. It's just, we've talked about revolutions going around and around of it. Every once in a while, what's old is new again, or what's new is old again. So I think from that perspective of bringing back a previous format, it's revolutionary. But in itself, no, I don't think it is. So I would agree with you there.
Do you want to ring the spoiler bell? And then we'll kind of talk about some of the stuff that actually happens in the film.
I've got to look around. I've misplaced. Oh, here it is. Yes. Okay. Now I can ring the spoiler bell.
Right. Oh yeah.
I mean, I was
still sounds good even despite the dust. Carry on. Yeah.
Oh, it's always good. Any bell's good. I will extend my thought a little bit. I think what I do like about this film is that, in terms of revolution, it's sort of like, it's a film that passes on the gauntlet a little bit, right? It's like it's encouraging young people who have ideas that are very often overlooked, because these guys were all in their 20s probably when this was, I mean, they're all alive still, but they're in their 70s. So I mean, at this time they're in their early 20s, so they're kids. And I think that's, and even including Lorne Michaels. So I think the thing that I like is that it's revolutionary in the sense that you're giving young people who aren't tired and aren't just overplayed and just calling it in. You're giving them a chance to do something new or different. Some of it's crap. I mean, there's some bits in there that I just found Andy Kaufman. I'm not a big Andy Kaufman fan, so
okay.
There's some really mundane stuff in there, but it hadn't been done, right? Or it hadn't been done recently, so they're just grabbing some things from the past. The role of George Carlin as I guess he's the guest host, but you don't see him very much, but he would have been an elder comedian by that point. He would have been one of the earlier guards of comedians. By then,
he turns up kind of with a record in hand to promote, doesn't he? He kind of said, I'm going to promote the record. It's the first thing I'm going to say when I go on stage. I'm going to ask some of the usual screenwritery type questions, because I do feel like we are kind of duty bound to kind of discuss some of these ideas. I mean, the film, it's great that we're watching it with a Robert Altman film, because this film does feel a lot like a Robert Altman pastiche, doesn't it? It has these lots and lots of tracking shots, lots of Steadicam, a big ensemble cast. Yeah. They're quite a kind of fresh, improvised feeling, I think, to a lot of the dialogue and the action. Quite a loose structure. Yep. And it's all kind of very character-based, I think. So, I mean, any film about sketch comedy, where you have to show a few sketches, and there are some gags and there are some amusing jokes, which I sort of chuckled at a little bit. Yeah. But I think most of the best humour is actually character-based rather than gag-based. Just watching the people be themselves, I found more entertaining than listening to the jokes. But for all the ensemble-ness of it, you have to come away asking, well, whose film is it? Whose story is it, do you think?
Lorne Michaels for sure.
I mean, yeah. So that's what I wrote here. Obviously, it's Lorne's, but also because who else have I put? Can you guess who else I've put in my sentence?
Us, the viewer. It's the viewer's show.
Oh, good. Oh, the story of us. Oh, I like that. I put it's the show's story, insofar as like the show feels like a bigger character than any of the individuals who are in it.
Yep. Well, one of the things that I wrote down was that this is an origin story, I think.
Yeah.
There's so many origin stories that are coming out, and people are going back and doing origin stories. And after 50 years, it seems sensible or profitable to make an origin story for Saturday Night Live. So I felt like I think you've articulated it better than I have, but I think it's an origin story for the show itself. Yes. And there's so many characters. Obviously, it's Lawrence because he's in the film all the time, but they make, they go very far out of their way to introduce each character, and even some really ancillary characters that I didn't even know had much to do with Saturday Night Live. So there's a scene where they pick up, is it Alan Zweibel, I think? He's writing jokes in a bar, Paul Schaefer, the music director, is very, very obviously in there. And they're giving you a lot of characters. And I don't think it doesn't give them much time to really become deep characters, but you get the notions that all these people had a role in Saturday Night Live, and you are introduced to every one of them at one point or another. So,
I mean, it feels like a lot happens, and also not very much happens.
Exactly.
Insofar as there are many, many little tiny events. Yep. It's not a huge amount of kind of narrative impetus. It's getting ready for a show, and eventually the show happens. Yep. And it's it's not a great many twists and turns. It's just many, many little scenes all pointing in the same direction. But I did write in my notes here, I mean, you're exactly right about having many, many characters, all of whom get a little moment. Yeah. This film does observe one of my favourite little screenwriting rules, which is, I would argue that more or less every character, however small, does get a subplot in this film. Some of those subplots are really, really, really small. But they exist. So I've made a little note of some of them. So the guy who I will call Andy Kaufman, who's actually called Andy Kaufman, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I guess so.
So Kaufman, he starts out the film, and he's kind of just a bit weird and separate from everybody else, and he's carrying this record player around, and he's sort of unassuming and doesn't really understand what other people are talking about. And then at the end, he saves the day with his funny song. Mm-hmm. It's like he gets this little turning point. The guy who's the production assistant, he's sort of hapless and hopeless, but then he smokes a joint and sort of undoes himself. Mm-hmm. Dan Aykroyd is like this really big character, and he has to be the center of attention, and he's always kind of making everybody else sort of gravitate around him. And then quite late in the film, he is in a sketch with the female construction workers, and in the sketch, he's the straight man.
Yep.
And it's like even he has this little evolution.
By far my favorite scene in the film, by the way.
Yes, it's like a skit which actually works. I'd be very interested to know, and I do not know, whether the skits that they perform are the actual Saturday Night Live skits, or whether they are new material that's been written for the film.
Good point. Yeah, I think that they're very condensed moments. You get a lot of them.
Yeah.
But when you add them all up, I mean, your question about whose story it is I think, a valid question. It seems so obvious, but at the same time, you get all these little pieces of stories, and then you wonder, well, what is the big story? And there's the question that the film asks of itself is, what is the show, right? They keep saying that again and again. Everyone's saying, Lauren, what is this show? What is the show? And the executives are saying, what is the show? So it's obviously not, it was still gestating at that point up until the very first episode starts, so I think they don't even know what the show is. They just know that they want to do all these silly little gags and, hope that some of them stick. And so that question is never fully answered. I mean, you get the final scene where they actually end up pulling it off, but that is the big question. It's not only whose story is it, but what is the show, I guess. And so the show is a character. I agree with you there.
As far as theme, I think there's a fairly clear theme which runs through both of the films, which is simply I written here stronger together. Or there is strength in community. Mm-hmm. I think that's what the film is trying to say, isn't it? That everybody is kind of fighting against each other until they all pull together, and then it actually works. Mm-hmm. There's a little moment at the end, a really kind of simple, and it's probably fairly well telegraphed, but I enjoyed it very much. A little simple moment. About halfway through the movie, some bricks are delivered, and they have to be laid really, really quickly to form a little square for George Carlin to stand on to deliver his kind of monologue. And there's this one guy who's just laying the bricks, and that's all he does all the way through the second half of the film. Mm-hmm. And there's a bunch of union guys standing around saying, well, laying bricks, that's not part of our contract. We're not touching those bricks. That's nothing to do with us. And then in the last few minutes, just before the cameras roll, all the union guys get up and they say, we'll help you lay the bricks. And they put the bricks down finally. Yeah. And it's a pretty kind of unsubtle moment, but I found it, a little bit moving and fun and cute, and it's everybody pulling together. That's what we want to see. Yeah, that's sort of what the theme of the whole movie is, isn't it? All these people all working together can make something that's real. They're all kind of bricks, and the bricks on their own do very much until you assemble them into a wall or a floor. Yep.
And then they become a foundation. I think that's probably a very key part.
Oh, that's good. Oh, you're always going one step ahead of me. That's
nice,
good.
Solid foundation. Yeah. I didn't understand why the bricklayer, the mason, was in a fight at the beginning, though. I mean, and again, that might just be to be as wild as possible. Like, he gets punched up by someone who's supposed to accept the delivery and didn't want the bricks, and then he's got a bloody eye, and he goes up and starts laying bricks. One thing that kind of bugged me a little bit about it was that because you're introducing all these characters all the time, there's a lot of sort of exposition that just is very blatant, and you're in this weird space because now in hindsight we know these guys. They're huge, they're famous, and the film keeps telling us who they are, and characters tell each other who they are, but we don't really know because they're not on screen and we don't get that much of a story. And then of course in hindsight we do know who they are because they're all famous people who played for 5 years and then went off on their various careers. So it's there's lots of exposition too. That's the other thing and I think it's because you force yourself as a filmmaker to put all the exposition in there. Is if you have more and more characters, you have to do more and more exposition, and you have to be somewhat faithful to reality here because it's a biography to a certain extent, right there, or a shelf full of biographies in one film.
And most of the characters in the film are still alive, aren't they? I mean, these people are still around. Dan Aykroyd's still alive, and Chevy Chase is still alive, I think. And so it's
not Belushi though. Of course, Belushi died.
Yes,
right after. I think he was off the show for a couple of years. But he probably died by 81 or 82, something like that. So,
when did they make Animal House? Wasn't that quite close towards the end of his life, I think?
Yeah, well, I feel like Animal House is probably 1978 or something like that.
Was it? Okay, right. Yeah,
and then I think he was still on the program, and then he didn't die too long after he finished with the program. I think he did a couple of films and a couple more films after that, and then died. Yeah.
John Belushi was never someone that I quite understood the popularity of. But clearly he meant a lot to some people. It's funny that he gets to do two kind of big standout skits in this film, and in both of those skits, they don't really have a punchline, and he ends up just kind of like falling over on the floor to mark the end of the skit, and he does that twice. Yep. And if I were a guy who wrote skits, that would really annoy me. That the only way they could come up with a punchline was just, the guy falls over on the floor. That's the end. Cut to something else. But they're comedy.
And they definitely spend a lot of time on the drama. There's the tension of, is he going to sign his contract or not? And they carry that through probably ad nauseum, in my opinion. But it's very funny because you get all these stressed out moments, but the tension is really two things, I think. There's Belushi, where is he? Lorne Michaels goes out looking for him at one point. Because he's in a bar. Someone says he's in a bar somewhere. Is he going to sign the contract? And he's actually ice skating with, I think it was Gilda Radner watching him at Rockefeller Square, which I find hard to believe because I don't think they put that ice out in October. Ice is late. Anyway, I'm just nitpicking right now. There's that piece of tension. And then the other piece of tension is Lorne Michaels' wife, Rose, going to use her maiden name or her married name in the credits? They keep asking up until the last minute what the name is going to be. So there are a couple of these little manufactured moments of tension, which they just don't really, I don't think they add a whole lot.
No, I agree. I don't think they do. But this film is, it's like you correctly say, it's pretty short. It's like, it's only an hour and 40 minutes. I bet the script is 240 pages. There's a lot of words. A lot of things happen. There's a lot spoken, lots and lots and lots of dialogue.
Yeah.
And I feel like you could probably almost watch it in another language and actually still get most of the most important salient points.
Yeah,
I think there's a surprising amount for such a talking film. There is a surprising amount of character through action, I think, in this film. I think just the way that the characters move through space and their body language actually tells as much of the story in my mind as the dialogue.
Yeah,
the dialogue is almost orthogonal to the action of the story. Really, the dialogue is full of gags, but the central theme about let's all work together and make this happen, is rarely spoken about, and yet is present in the body language of every scene.
Yeah. Yep. And I have congratulations for them too, because I think a lot of these are long takes that require a lot of rehearsal and position and whatnot. And you're talking about how they move through it, but it all feels very impromptu. It feels very live, despite being probably rehearsed to death. Like some. They move very well, but that's because they practiced it a lot. But I think the real minor miracle there is that they practiced it a lot, they rehearsed it a lot, but it still feels authentic and like live action.
I don't know if you've seen any of Jason Reitman's other pictures. He is the son of Ivan Reitman.
Yep.
So I wonder how he got started in showbiz.
I couldn't imagine.
And I have seen a number of his other pictures. Juno, did you see that?
I remember Juno way back when. I feel like that was one of his first big...
Moderately amusing, not fantastic. Up in the Air, which is kind of George Clooney comedy, which I think is not really that good.
With Anna Kendrick from the last podcast.
Ah, yes. Thank You for Smoking. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I did see that one. I like that one. I remember that being kind of funny.
I remember coming Thank You for Smoking and feeling very much, is that it? I think. I came to think, that was like a reasonably amusing premise, which had been really, really undersold. And then recently he's made these two Ghostbusters kind of revisits.
Wait a second. How did he get that gig?
Yeah, I know. How weird. But I've only seen one of those new Ghostbusters films, and it was really pretty abysmal, actually. Astonishingly bad, in fact, I thought.
Yeah.
A film which was, really needed a lot of effort to become quite as bad as it really was. It's written by him, with his kind of screenwriting partner Gil Keenan, who I think is British, actually. He also worked on these two recent Ghostbusters films. So, I'm not sure that I have a great deal of hope for him either. So I'm pleasantly surprised that the two of them have now actually come up with something which really entertained me and I felt was actually about something.
Yeah, definitely on a technical level, well directed in terms of movement, blocking, and all that, and getting all those actors to to be on stage at the same time. That's a lot of work right there. I'm not gonna celebrate the writing on this film or any of the other films. I don't think it's not phenomenal. It doesn't really blow me away. But a lot of the dialogue that you said is kind of plentiful, but also fairly naturalistic. I think that's going to come up in my thoughts part of the. I've got a question for you because I know you're experienced with comedy.
Oh dear, I'll be getting flashbacks.
Ultimately, I think, especially thinking of the show as a character, and this is an origin story. It really ends on this. Lauren Michaels is his last name Michaels? Did I get that right, Lauren Michaels?
Yeah, it is Michaels. Yeah.
I'm losing my mind. He seems happy. They do the opening skit with Belushi falling to the ground ultimately, and it seems to be, if not a success, it at least worked, right? So it closes on this coming of age shot where he finally sees this happen, and it's being recorded live, despite the fact that Willem Dafoe's bad guy character, Dave Tebbutt, was going to pull the show or not record it at all, and they were just going to favor Carson. There's a lot of, I think, invented drama around Milton Berle and Johnny Carson.
Yes.
But, it ends on this really kind of coming of age moment. It worked. We're all young people, and in hindsight, we know that they're going to be doing this for 50 years. I wonder if he likes his job now. I mean, it just must feel like labor. But I think it is an origin story, and it is this coming of age thing, and the actors have come of age, and the show has come of age, and bam. They get out. That's the last moment.
Yeah.
Closing
It's
image.
It is cute actually. Yeah, the closing image is, Chevy Chase comes out onto stage, doesn't he say, and says, it's Saturday night, and then everybody cheers, and you get a freeze frame on Lorne Michaels and Rose is his wife, isn't it?
Yes. Who was in our film? I Used to Be Funny. I think we just. Rachel
she
Sennett?
is. There is a very cute little crossover there because she was in I Used to Be Funny. I Used to Be Funny was directed by Ali Pankew, whose name I still cannot confidently pronounce.
I'm not even going to try.
She is the partner of Naomi McPherson, who is the singer from Moona, Australian pop band. I think they're Australian. And Naomi McPherson plays Janice in this film. And comes and sings a song with an acoustic guitar halfway through the movie. Oh my!
You are so up to date. You sound like a teenager.
Wow. But I am very, very far from a teenager. So I remind myself every morning as I get out of bed. For all this film is about coming of age and the excitement of the new.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say that for all that newness, there are still a few felonies that I think the Cliché Squad might be interested in.
Cliché Squad.
I'm interested to hear from the Cliché Squad.
Well, they are based in New York, actually, aren't they? At least I feel like that's where every crime squad is based. So every cliche.
They can visit the set and write citations for cliches.
So one cliche which you have already alluded to, I've got to ask you. I'm sure you've spent more time in New York than I have. How many ice rinks are there in New York? Wow. Is there one every 2 blocks? Because it kind of feels like there is one every 2 blocks.
There are the two big ones. That's Rockefeller Plaza, I guess, right? Rockefeller Square. That's the one where they put up the big tree at the holidays.
Okay.
There's Woolman Rink in Central Park. So those are the two that I know of. I'm sure there's some other ones here and there, but on every corner, no. But NBC famously has one. So but they don't have it in October to my knowledge. We can, Rockefeller Plaza, Rockefeller Square has all these old sort of Art Deco buildings. It's gorgeous. And they do have, of course, the big statue that they allude to there, and the fountain in the warmer weather. And they always have a nice rink out there. Yeah, it's sort of, it's lower down. It's not sidewalk level. It's actually sort of in this little. Used to know the word for that, but it'll come to me later. So it's
sunken
sort of
garden.
Yeah, it's a garden level. Yeah. And that is, I might be totally wrong. It's possible that it's year round. I remember seeing it. I was there in February last year, so it was definitely there at that time. Feels more like a holiday thing to me, but maybe it's year round. But in 1975, I don't know it was, and it's a ridiculous point to belabor because it's not important. It's just where they decided to put that scene.
I do just feel like I've seen so many films where somebody storms off in New York, and next time we see them, they are skating. It just feels like it's just the standard operating protocol for anybody who storms out of anything in New York. Yes, go skating.
Would think it's the ice skating capital of the world, but it's not. It's probably Minnesota, by the way.
Oh,
there's more skating out there, and they don't put it in their films from the prairies.
There are a whole bunch of other kind of cliches in the film, insofar as I felt like the boozing sponsors, the producer who offers everything and then withdraws it, comedians with egos as big as the Empire State Building. That's what I wrote in my notes.
So I wrote executives, evil executives, and petulant stars. I guess we have some cliches there. I want to share one with you though.
Oh yes,
I have this cliche. I think that funny people are always funny. And James, you're a funny person. You've done stand-up, but there are times when you aren't funny. But that's because you take comedy seriously, and I think comedians take comedy seriously too. But in this film, everyone has a wisecrack at every moment, and it's just it feels very unnatural to me. Like there've got to be some moments when they're not funny, or a lot of them are also depressed, right? There's a lot of connection between.
Yeah, supposedly. I'll tell you what my observation is. I think that comedians in ones and maybe twos, are universally unfunny and usually, dour, serious, not funny people at all. But if you get 4 or 5 in the same room, then especially male comedians, there is such a powerful impulse to try and out-joke the other guys.
Exactly.
So this is what used to infuriate Rachel about if we would go out with a bunch of comedians after a show or something like that, and it would just be like 5 guys sitting around a table all trying to top the last gag. And you kind of think, well, is that being funny? Maybe to some people, watching that go on, that is amusing. But actually, there was something. It was like watching people trying to drink each other under the table or something like that. There was clearly something. And there was a lot of self-loathing going on in the form of jokes. So I think comedians, when you get them all in the room together, they are all funny, but they're all funny out of a kind of a desperate egotism rather than a warm togetherness.
Oh, that's brilliant!
So, a different kind of funny. It was interesting watching that scene in the writers' room, seeing young comedians and old, kind of hackier writers, who were less idealistic and more resigned to the fact that gags must be churned out, whether they are good or bad. You just got to churn them out. Yeah, hack work. That's how it works.
I think that's it for cliches for me. Did you have another one?
Yep. So I wrote down this kind of series of cliches, and I said at the end. But because this film is like you say, it's an origin story. I feel like this film could be excused for pointing out the origins of the cliches.
Yeah. Oh.
So or maybe actually every cliched image happened a first time. And maybe they're trying to suggest that actually this is where these well-worn cliches were born.
Yeah, and to the extent that there is a plot, the cliches don't. Or I should say the plot doesn't rely on cliches to make it work. So they're just kind of things that are real afterthoughts, or just they're satellite cliches maybe.
Well, that's good.
Cliches in space. That kind of satellite.
That's a neologism worth writing down. Satellite cliches.
But I would say I was just going to say one last thing I probably want to mention is that this film seems really like over tethered to reality, in the sense that they have to use these characters and they have to have some veracity, I guess, but then it's also not very clearly tethered to reality as well. So, that's that suspension of disbelief that you sort of have to. I guess I'm not used to suspending disbelief in a film like this. I'm used to doing it in some big action film or some superhero kind of film or whatnot. But in a film like this, you kind of just expect that, you're going to believe everything. You don't need to suspend belief. But I think in this film, you do have to let go of reality a little bit and just enjoy the ride.
It reminds me of that line from Lost Highway, the David Lynch movie, where Bill Pullman says, I refuse to have cameras in the house. I like to remember things my own way, not the way they really happened. Yeah. And, that's exactly what this film is, isn't it? It's, people kind of remembering, we did this, we did that. It's not necessarily what really happened, but this is kind of what the memory has become. So that's what we're going to film.
Yeah.
Let's have a break. And then we will talk about basically the same film, but seen from the other end of the telescope, I think. We'll come back and we'll talk about A Prairie Home Companion.
So here at the Two Real Cinema Club, we scored a huge post-election sponsorship from the American Plastics Association, James. I just got this. I don't know if you've heard about this one yet.
No, the APA.
Yes. Well, they have another acronym too. I'll explain in a little bit. The money is rolling in during this time of growth and graft, and Two Real Cinema Club is open for business, folks. The Plastics Ass, that's the association, they call them Plastics Ass, is called, that's how the association, I guess they call themselves the Plastic Ass. Anyway, they're excited to announce their Islands of Eden project, which is the research and development department. It hails as an extension of the Islands of Floating Garbage development. I don't know if you were aware of this. This is a new thing. It's also essentially their initiative to solve the housing crisis that currently plagues nearly the whole world. In close collaboration with the Fossil Fuels United, or FU, Plastics Ass plans to create more and more durable forever plastics with an eye towards repurposing plastic at the end of its usefulness. So it's a rebirth of sorts that's facilitated and unregulated by the upcoming Environmental Profit Agency. So we used to have something here called the Environmental Protection Agency. It's now the Environmental...
By the time those guys turn to profit, you're right.
Yes, and that's new to the Trump administration cabinet, the incoming Trump cabinet. Here's how it works. With fewer cumbersome regulations, the completely environmentally neutral practice of open dumping becomes, open ocean dumping, I should say, becomes more purposeful. That's right. We plan to create islands of floating garbage, and by extension, islands of paradisal living. As the islands are fortified through benign chemical interactions, they become perfect foundations for affordable housing. These non-white communities, because the island kingdom of heaven is for everyone, right, will provide endless entry-level homes for large populations. And because they're kind of safe places to work, live, and breathe, they're also exit life living level housing. Our test islands have proven to be attractive to fish who often deliver themselves dead and ready for human consumption. This Pleistocene-age kelp, dulse, and nori taste just as much like plastic as the less engineered natural alternatives. And the plentiful swimming pools, nice and salty, and just a little bit more acidic in a good way that promotes skin regeneration. As we like to say at Plastics Ass, island life is always better on the buoyant, repurposed refuge spaces. I guess that's a floating garbage island. American Plastics Association, making rich people richer since that moment with Dustin Hoffman in The Graduate, and making poor neighborhoods poisonous as long as we can remember. In fact, look for our most recent development in what was once known as Cancer Alley. We now know it as Clean Living Gardens. Find us at fuass.shit. I think that's an Italian URL, isn't it? Or maybe Schenken Italian, something like that.
It's about time people stopped complaining about microplastics and concentrated on our new friends, macroplastics.
Precisely. Yes. Oh, good. You did get the memo.
So we are swimming back to the mainland from the paradisical plastic island. We've got a long way to swim, though. We are going to talk about A Prairie Home Companion, Robert Altman picture from 2006, which is set about as far away from the sea as it's possible to get, I think, isn't it?
No.
So St. Paul, Minneapolis. Is that not in the middle of the States? It's not. I'm just going to demonstrate my terrible knowledge of geography now. Yeah. Is it not?
It's right in the middle. Right in the middle.
It is in the middle, right?
North, right on the northern border there with Canada.
Canada.
Yes. used to be the Assiniboine Ocean, though. That's an ancient sea. But they started, the dinosaurs started putting their feces there and also putting plastics there, the early plastics. So it's basically it. It's a plastic prairie.
So come with us to the plastic prairie where we have watched this Garrison Keillor film. Now, he's not a figure who is widely known in the UK, but
probably not.
I was thrilled to learn that he was the guy who does the voiceover for the Honda Power of Dreams advert that used to play all over the place about 10 or 15 years ago.
Is that right? Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah. I had read his book, Lake Wobegon Days, from, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. So I was kind of aware of him from that. But is he a more universally recognized public figure in the States?
He was on Minnesota Public Radio forever, and then National Public Radio carried the program Lake Wobegon Days for a long time. And then at some point, I think it became A Prairie Home Companion. There were maybe two different shows. Maybe Minnesota Public Radio was Lake Wobegon Days, and then A Prairie Home Companion. But it's basically an extension of the first show. In fact, he had these moments. The main soliloquy every night was all about going back to his home in Lake Wobegon. This is precedent setting for us here at Two Wheel Cinema Club. Might give us a permission structure because I think he's been mildly canceled.
I think he has.
Okay.
So for inappropriate behavior, I think.
Which I read a little bit. It was a pat on the back.
Okay.
In his opinion.
Okay. That covers a multitude of evils, doesn't it? Yeah. Which part of the back were you patting?
That's another question. There were no images online, fortunately, so we're going to acknowledge that bit and try to move on. I loved his program. It was very sort of literate and interesting, and at the same time just mundane. It was like just talking about prairie life, but with a lovely eloquence and nice nostalgia and reminiscence. But a film it never was.
Right.
Until 2006.
But the radio show, was it broadcast nationally? Something you could listen to anywhere?
Yeah, it was pretty, even until probably 10 or 12 years ago, I'd say. Yeah, it was usually on Saturday night, and I think it was live most of the time. So they probably recorded it there maybe an hour earlier than we are. So, I used to hear it like 6 or 7 o'clock dinner time on Saturday nights. So they were probably shooting or filming it or recording it, I guess, late afternoons for themselves out there. Yeah, and it was pretty well national. And they'd replay it throughout the week too. I think you could get another crack at it on a Sunday or whatever. So, and there were reruns, of course, too. And a lot of musical guests. This is a very musical film. He definitely had lots of musicians come out, and that really carried the film. That really carries the film, I think. I don't think that carried the show as much. A lot of the Guy Noir stuff that we'll talk about and some of the radio play elements were probably more of the show, but there were always some musical guests who came in and did a couple numbers. I think it was 2 hours every Saturday night.
Whoa. I was trying to think of a UK equivalent, and I think the best thing I could think of is Loose Ends on BBC Radio 4, which I think may still be on. Certainly used to be, which is a little bit like a sort of a chat and variety show on a Saturday morning. They'd always have like a comedian, and they'd have some music, and someone would come and talk about something, and it was all quite breezy and entertaining. Yeah. But not nearly as involved. Or as kind of characterful, I think, as Prairie Home Companion. So it's something similar but different.
Yeah.
So, for people who haven't seen the film, A Prairie Home Companion, do you want to tell us a story? Such as it is.
I'd be happy to. A Prairie Home Companion was directed by Robert Altman. I think we've already mentioned this is his last film. The screenplay was written by Garrison Keillor and Ken Lazebnik, who, and this is kind of telling, I think he's most famous for 33 episodes of Touched by an Angel. And I don't know if you've had the displeasure of having that series broadcast in the UK or not.
No. I can imagine what it's about, though.
It's like a Hallmark holiday program every week, invading your house with angels every week. And there's an angel in this film too, I think, although she's called Dangerous Woman. It's an interesting motif. The cast features Garrison Keillor. It's all-star. Meryl Streep, Lindsay Lohan, Lily Tomlin, Kevin Kline, Woody Harrelson, John C. Reilly, Tommy Lee Jones, Virginia Madsen, and Maya Rudolph. And I'm sure I've left out some others, but maybe we have to do that just to keep the pod a little shorter. We open on the water towers of the prairie in silhouette as dusk comes upon us. Guy Noir, played by Kevin Kline, is sort of our interactive narrator. It's a little bit of a silly opening on the private eye in the diner scene. He's actually just a security guard for the Fitzgerald Theater, where Woody Harrelson and John C. Reilly rehearse their Dusty and Lefty. They're sort of these ribald cowboy who duo, and it's a songster act, I guess. Meryl Streep and Lindsay Lohan are at an odds mother and daughter couple from a singing family, and it's the last radio show in the theater because the property has come under new ownership and the family intends to sell, I guess, the radio station, the show, and or the theater, or everything, I'm not sure. But bad guys with a lot of money are going to put an end to this way of life. As Guy Noir, Kevin Kline seems to be living in some kind of fantasy world because it's interrupted by Virginia Madsen's dangerous woman role. So the scene is sort of being invaded by this angel. We don't know what she's doing there. But comes to be that she is, I guess, an angel of death or something. My goodness. Anyway, she appears, she disappears. She's in a white trench coat, and she's sort of detached from the living world. It seems like sometimes people see her, sometimes they don't. But ultimately, this is sort of a concert film, I find. It's full of many musically, they're fine performances. The story sort of hinges on whether bad guy Tommy Lee Jones, who oddly has a face for film, not unlike Charles Bronson, whereas Garrison Keillor really has a face for radio, I would say. Anyway, whether he's going to shut down the show in the theater, will the theater shut down? Will Lola, that's Lindsay Lohan's character, sing on the night? And a pre-spoiler, the answer is yes to everything. Stuff gets shut down. Lindsay sings. And that's it. I'm not going to ask more questions because I've just answered the important ones, I think. So yeah, I feel like this is definitely, it's funny because it's, as I mentioned in the opening there a little bit, I don't remember it as being that musically heavy. I mean, they sing all the advertisements. I know that they're musical guests, but there was a lot of talk, and it's hard to make radio into a film. It's just they're two totally different mediums, and as a result, I think they rely on the music a lot, and a lot of the music is great.
Yeah.
And it does come off sort of as a musical hour and a film about live music.
And it's all kind of bluegrass music, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, or Americana.
Is that the right word for it?
I would say Americana, yeah.
Americana, okay, it's beautiful. And it was kind of reminding me, there was like a brief period at the turn of the millennium when bluegrass was really trendy. Yeah. Not very long before this, Brother Wherefore Art Thou had been a big hit for the Coen brothers, and I had the soundtrack to that on CD. It's it's some great bluegrass music. Americana is the word, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
I really enjoyed the songs in this movie, and it's probably not the sort of music that I would usually choose to put on, but once it was there, I really enjoyed it. But my big takeaway from this film, and the top note I wrote in my little book here, was this film is Saturday night for old people, basically, isn't it? It's a very similar idea. It's about the lead up to and then the broadcast of a live sort of 90-minute entertainment.
Yep.
And there's a whole bunch of different kind of, there's a band, and then there's kind of comedians, and there's they have little kind of pre-written skits, and there's some kind of clashes behind the stage, and there's this feeling of moving on. In this case, it's finality rather than something beginning. Yeah. But it's explore some very similar ideas. Yeah.
Yep. I agree with you, and I think you just took the words right from my mouth. This is the end life, whereas the Saturday night is all about the beginning of something. This is the end of something. So, and it's old people. This one's more about old people, and the other one's about young people. And Prairie Home Companion is, again, we mentioned it played earlier in the day. It wasn't 11:30 into Sunday morning. It was more like dinner time Saturday. And I mean an early dinner time, the kind of old people dinner time.
For all that it's cozy and enjoyable and like a sweet confection, this film does feel a little bit like it's a mashup of maybe sort of 2 or 3 different films.
Yeah.
There's the actual radio show itself. There's these scenes with Lily Tomlin and Meryl Streep behind the scenes, and Lindsay Lohan is Meryl Streep's daughter, and they have some kind of quite entertaining scenes together, and they're slightly at odds, but they love each other. And Meryl Streep is always reminiscing, and Lily Tomlin is always a little bit downbeat. Yeah. And Lindsay Lohan is writing these poems about suicide. And it's all, it's quite kind of comedy stuff, and some nice upbeat songs. But then Virginia Madsen as this kind of trench-coated angel, just feels strangely uncomfortable and weird to me. It's like she's sort of stepped in from a different film. Yep. And then Kevin Kline as a sort of slapstick gumshoe also feels like a visitor from a third film as well. It's like none of them really quite belong in the film. Yep. And altogether it just about works. But it does feel like Meryl Streep and Lily Tomlin, Garrison Keillor, and also Woody Harrelson and John C. Reilly, they all seem to belong in the same space. Then Virginia Madsen and Kevin Kline have sort of been dropped in from somewhere else.
Yes. And even Tommy Lee Jones coming in as he's called the Axe Man.
Yes.
The rich guy who's going to put it all out of its misery. He also feels like he comes out from outer space. He comes alone too, which I thought was odd. And he doesn't seem like that much of a bad guy. And then the angel sort of takes care of him very easily.
Also, it looks like when Tommy Lee Jones was available to shoot his scenes, most of the other actors couldn't be there because he talks to hardly anybody, does he?
Yeah, just Kevin Kline.
It's just him and Kevin Kline. He doesn't really speak to any other people.
Got him for a day. Got him. Well, you don't want to spend depending on the time of year, you might not want to spend too much time in Minnesota, but it is. Yeah, it's definitely kind of a mashup, and there's a lot of nostalgia, and there's a lot of talking. Streep and Tomlin seem to be, they're just exposition machines. It's they have a couple of great musical numbers, but they're just talking about their parents and all this stuff in the past. And I think you get that sense of an uneasiness of moving on in this film, and the nostalgia of the old radio days, the old music days. There's not a lot of present tense action or anything like that. And I remember this when I first saw it too. And I was glad to go back and see this film because I felt like it was a fairly average film when I first saw it, and I remember it as being kind of a concert film, a very bizarre concert film with Garrison Keillor getting in there a lot and saying a lot of kind of funny things, kind of insightful things, but it's not his medium. He's not a film guy. He's definitely a radio guy. He works on radio, I think, very well, but I always had doubts when I heard that they were going to make this film, and then when I went to see it, and I think I remembered it very well. And I think I remember there was more drama to me around Lindsay. Is she going to sing or not? And are they going to be happy as a family together and all that? And that's still pretty light touch in the film as well. So, it's not a nothing burger. I wouldn't say that, but there's not a lot of meat there. And I think that comes from the fact of, I think it's a Garrison Keillor story. And, I think it's, I don't know, he's not a screenwriter. He's a radio guy. And I think that's probably the big, tension. I think that's the thing that makes it not work, is the fact that it's just not written like a film. There's some concert films I love, and this is kind of a concert film, but it's not exactly that either. So, because each of the performers sort of brings their little bit of story in. But the highlights are definitely some of the songs. I think it's, and the house band too. Those are his actual musicians from the show. So they all seem very comfortable.
They do, don't they? And they're fantastically professional musicians.
Yeah.
It's a great band. This is the sort of band that's been playing together for a long time, so they all know each other really, really well. They're all perfectly together. It's excellent.
Yeah, and I think maybe too perfect. We can talk about that later, maybe when we synthesize, but it feels too rehearsed somehow.
This is something which I haven't been able to say for a good few weeks. Yeah. I'm happy to say this week I have read the book.
No,
insofar as so I did read Late Wobbegong Gaze many years ago. But no, I've had the script for A Prairie Home Companion on my shelf for many years, and so there's an interesting introduction which Garrison Keillor writes in the book, which is quite enlightening. I didn't realise. So he started doing the show in 1974.
Yeah.
I think so. And in the book, Keeler he identifies himself as back then. He really felt like he was a writer, and he was doing a little bit of radio announcing just as a kind of a sideline to fill in while he was waiting to finish his novel.
Oh yeah.
And then that sideline gradually turned into his whole career. Interestingly, the A Prairie Home Companion is actually named after a Norwegian cemetery in Minnesota. And he stole the format from Nashville's Grand Old Opry, which I don't really entirely sure what that is, but which I'm guessing is a Nashville variety show. After kind of starting doing the show, apparently he's had 3 film projects at different times. None of them happened. So he has dabbled with screenwriting, but he's never been able to write a script which actually got off the ground. Interestingly, he claims that when he was writing this script, he didn't want to be in it. He wrote his role for George Clooney. But Robert Altman insisted that he be in it, not George Clooney. In part, that will be because George Clooney is much more expensive than Garrison Keillor, I realise. But apparently Altman approached him saying he wanted to make a film about life backstage at a radio show. And then he sort of left it up to Garrison Keillor to write a story that would allow him to explore that world. And I think he kind of ummed and ahed about this and that and ended up going with this kind of avenging angel, or at least this kind of mysterious angel notion. The Guy Noir character, I think, he's like a radio show regular, but he's played by Garrison Keillor, not Kevin Kline.
Very funny stuff, yeah.
Okay,
very good. But not, again, not visual, so it's not the physical comedy necessary. It's much more word comedy. It's not. It comes out of dialogue. It doesn't come out of him flopping around or farting on camera or anything like that. So.
Yes, which is kind of weird, isn't it? That sort of feels like it comes out of another film. I think that part of the key to what this film is sort of about comes in this sort of slightly disconnected scene between Virginia Madsen and Garrison Keillor, where she explains to him that she was a like a radio listener driving in a car, listening to his show when she was in a fatal accident.
That's right.
And she says that as her car kind of careered off the road and in the moment before she died, the thought that went through her head was that the story that she was really laughing at on the radio wasn't actually all that funny.
That's right.
And I think the kind of the conclusion that the film is trying to get you to come to is that the reason that it's entertaining is because the characters are like surrogate friends. Mm-hmm. And it's the company you keep that makes it entertaining, not the things that they tell you.
Yeah.
So I think that is the idea that the film is trying to explore. And in many ways, I came away feeling like the theme of this film is just the same as the theme of Saturday Night, which is stronger together, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about community. It's about coming together.
Yeah. I love the inadvertent theme of dying by one of Garrison Keillor's boring stories. I think that's that's pretty good too, though. I mean, I think there's so little action. Like Act 1 doesn't really happen. It doesn't end. The midpoint passes. There's still no real incident, and then you get this limo arriving, and it's the Axeman coming.
Yes.
And you're thinking, okay, this is gonna be something's happening. Something's finally happening. I love that he sort of outs himself as this Christian capitalist, and I thought that's a nice little interesting cultural critique there. And all the angels flying around. He's the Axeman, so you get I think he's wearing dark clothes, and she's got that white coat on, and but it's there's some conflict in his character because he was a musician and he should appreciate these things, but in the end he's just going to end the show and raise the theater, and it seems like it's going to be an urgent scene for someone, and it isn't. Even he dies, which I didn't understand that. Like the angel sends him off to his death, but he manages to, sell the theater and the radio station and everything before he dies.
Yes.
And then finally, it ends on this very cutesy ending with everyone just happening upon the diner at the same time, and Guy Noir's there, and I guess it's a few years later.
Yeah.
There's more nostalgia talk and talk about putting it all back together or some sort of traveling roadshow or something like that. And then the angel comes again, and we kind of end on her white coat. But who's she coming for? Is it all of them, or is it one person in particular? Did you get a sense of what that ending meant?
I interpreted that as being that she's come for radio. That actually and this might be something that we will allude to again in the synthesis. That I think the mere notion that they might get back together again and start doing the whole thing again is the thing which has to die. It's that this notion of live cutesy radio that joins the whole country together. That's what's on its way out. That was how I interpreted that. Could be completely wrong.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah. And this is
it's nice, and also kind of a bit depressing and dreadful, really. But
definitely dreadful, but a nice touch, I guess, if that's what happened, if that's what they meant.
I think you are right that the right way to think about this film is as a concert film.
Yeah,
and the music is when it soars. It's in the musical numbers that it really kind of comes alive.
Yep.
And there's amusing stuff in between. But I did feel like most of the time I was waiting for another song, and I was never waiting very long. And the songs were always very enjoyable.
And it is so much slower and more deliberate than the other film, and like the characters have a lot of time, but it's not really spent very well, I don't think. And the time spent singing and showing them in concert, that is well spent time. But I think in terms of story development, it just sort of meanders, and I don't know that they're really like classical setups and payoffs. And I think, I think just the radio and film are just really completely different beasts, and there's a lot of telling, as a result. It's because of radio, it's like there's lots of telling. There's not a whole lot of showing of what's happening. I will say the sound in this film is incredible. Just capturing all the dialogue, and the music is fantastic. I mean, there's kudos to the sound departments.
This film, this film does sound fantastic. I did let out a little squeal at the end of the film because I know you had already told me this, and I'd utterly forgotten until I sat down to watch it, that the sound in this film is by friend of the pod, Michael Primmer.
Friend of the pod, yeah, absolutely. I always say his sound is great, but I'm sincere on this one because this is a really complicated shoot because there's so many tracking shots and all these characters walking around mic'd up, and it's really consistent. It doesn't. I'd be curious to know how much was re-recorded because it sounds very clear. And I think they did it in the. I guess it is the Fitzgerald Theatre. I'll have to think about that.
But I think they did do it in the actual Fitzgerald Theatre. Yes.
So it's like home turf. It's a closed set. It's probably really easy to set it up the way you want it, and then just to work on it for a couple weeks until you get it right. So I think it pays off because the sound is great, and the musical performances were obviously very well rehearsed. And I'd be interested to know also like how much of that is Woody Harrelson and playing guitar. They're definitely singing, but are they actually playing instruments as well, and how all that came off? Because you've got two things going on at the same time. They're probably mic'd for dialogue, but you also have to be aware of the fact that all these instruments are probably mic'd up as well. So it's probably a couple of sound teams, honestly.
I will ask you the same old hoary screenwritery type question.
Yeah.
So we have discussed theme a little bit, but whose story do you think this was?
Well, wait a second. That you're giving me a hint. The last one was about the show. This one's radio. It's radio's story.
It's the story of radio.
The death of radio.
It kind of feels like it should sort of be Garrison Keillor's story, but sort of nothing really happens to him.
Yeah. No.
I mean, sort of nothing happens to most of the characters, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't obey that rule of letting every character, no matter how small, have a subplot. Because apart from is it Cliffy, or I can't remember the name of the character who dies.
Chuck, I think it was.
Chuck, is it Chuck? Not a great deal happens to any of the people on screen. They turn up and they smile and laugh and they entertain us, but that's sort of about as far as their story goes, I think.
Yep.
And so you don't get much of a feel of there's a kind of a wistful, melancholic finality somehow to it, but it doesn't really feel like the story is progressing or that we are marching towards the point of no return. Or, they don't even really kind of get that sense of dread that this is the last show and who knows what will happen.
Yeah. Well, one of my takeaways was that it feels like there comes a time when old, boring guys need to stop producing content. And I think that's maybe true of both Garrison Keillor and Robert Altman here. And I say that being an old, boring guy who will die before he produces any content. So It's a really good looking film. They did a great job lighting this film, and it's well photographed. But it is kind of dull. I mean, it definitely feels like it's made for the older folks who aren't going to stay awake for Saturday Night Live. You know?
Some enjoyable tunes for you to doze through, and then you can wake up for a little bit of dialogue.
Do you guys ever see Lawrence Welk in the UK?
I'm not sure. I know. I can't imagine anyone called Lawrence Welk being a big hit in the UK. Who was Lawrence Welk?
He's a musician and a band leader from, I think he was born in South Dakota, so the similar area, the Prairie. But he grew up. I don't know where he's from. Probably speaking Swedish or German. Like that part of the country is very sort of Northern European. So it was like this polka show, and it started probably in the 50s or 60s, and big orchestra, some little skits, but it was mostly just people coming out and singing various polka pieces and waltz pieces, and it's like very 70s colors, 70s gowns all over the place, and those terrible tuxedos that were blue and orange and white and all that. And it was. I mean, I remember it as being strictly television. I think he probably started out in radio, and then he got onto public television here. And they're just these, they're artifacts, man. He's got hundreds of shows that we still sometimes see on public television here because they're so desperate to put anything on and don't have any money. So we still watch these Lawrence Welk shows from the 70s. And it reminds me a little of that. Again, early on a Saturday night, it would come on. You could have a nice early dinner and be in bed by 8 o'clock. And it just felt like it was just made for senior citizens of the time. And this, I mean, I get very often I go to these concerts where they're all old people, and I feel like I'm the youngest person here. And I definitely got a little bit of that watching Prairie Home Companion. That I think I'm still younger than this stuff. I felt it sort of invigorated me a little bit. But I think you could probably tell more of a story. I think that would have helped. But and as you said early on, it's like this mishmash of a couple of stories that kind of work, and they're sort of faithful to the radio program too much, and that doesn't get you a lot of mileage in terms of making a film. Like one of the better sequences is the sound effects man, who's fantastic on the radio. Yeah. And they're really challenging him to make some crazy sounds, and he does a great job. But that's a radio gag, right? I mean, it's not really a film gag, so.
It's either needed more story or less story.
Yeah,
just show us the radio show and don't give us all the behind the scenes stuff. Or maybe having like a really, really crazy, fantastical behind the scenes story.
Yeah.
Where you kind of go around the back of the stage and there's a huge prairie or a mountain or something.
Sure.
Or I don't know, but something fantastical and crazy. Maybe.
Well, I mean, honestly, someone dying when the show is being made should be a pretty important scene, and it's actually kind of just glossed over.
Yep.
And even the way he dies, it's just very quiet. He just goes down there, lights some candles. I guess and this is probably during the time of Viagra. He's gonna see some action, I think, is the idea. He's setting this romantic scene up, and then I think maybe the Viagra just takes him out or something. But that would be funny, and that's not actually how the scene is. It's just that he dies. He goes down there and he dies, and no one seems too impressed by that or too concerned by it.
I'll tell you one thing. I have one last thought about the film, which is it makes me a bit sad we haven't seen more of Lindsay Lohan over the last 10 to 15 years.
I know,
I think she's a terrific screen presence. She's a very enjoyable, authentic actor, and it's a shame that she kind of didn't get the career that she probably deserved.
Yeah.
She is coming back shortly, I think, with Jamie Lee Curtis in a new Freaky Friday picture. Right. Yep. So I think her rehabilitation is underway. I'm looking forward to seeing her back in front of the camera.
Yeah. I hope so too. Yeah, I think this is right before she sort of started to struggle a little bit or lose her way a little bit. So, 2006 we said. So,
yeah,
I think she's been underappreciated for a long time now.
Yeah, good for her. Welcome back. Right. Well, we keep alluding to the synthesis. It's like we can't wait to join these two films up. They're like two jigsaw pieces that belong next to each other in the puzzle. But before we do that, I am going to force you to play my favorite game. Who am I?
Who am I?
I don't feel terribly forced. This is a pretty easy one for me this week, I think.
Oh, yes. I think, are you going to tell me you are Woody Harrelson?
Okay. Who are you then?
Who? No, really. Are you? Did I get it that right?
Yeah. I'm Dusty. He's this artist. He's trying to push the boundaries of art and performance, but he's really just telling a bunch of dirty jokes.
Now, for the next few months, whenever I think of you, I'm going to see Woody Harrelson.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Are you Woody
Have you got yourself a
Harrelson
big
too?
hat?
Is that what's going on here? You're also Woody Harrelson.
No, I'm not even John C. Reilly. I'm going to, as I usually do, I'm going to flatter myself. And I've already kind of alluded to this. I really identify with Lorne Michaels.
Yeah.
Am I as talented as him? No. Am I as patient as him? No way. He's what I really admire about all his. He's got this tremendous tenacity, and he keeps going, even though we only see him for 90 minutes. But I mean, he won't let go. He keeps moving forward. But he is also so incredibly patient. There were so many moments in that movie when I imagine that most people, certainly I, would have blown their top. When he comes out of the fire exit and the two jokers spray fake blood all over his shirt.
Yeah.
And his only reaction is, great gag, guys. He's still got that level of self-control, even as his dream crumbles around him. That's incredible. I am in no way a man to equal that. So clearly, this is my fantasy. He is funny and long-suffering and ambitious. But in my fantasy life, I wish I could wear those shoes. He's the TV producer that I wish I could be. Or alternatively, John C. Reilly.
Ooh.
And that way we could do a comedy song together about bad jokes.
Yeah. I liked their music quite a bit. I'm curious to see like how authentic it was, if they were
yes.
playing.
Yeah,
It definitely sounds like they're singing voices for sure. So,
well, if only there was somebody involved in the recording of the film that we could ask.
Email, text.
Okay, it's that time at last. Yes. I can't wait any longer. I'll play the jingle and we will do the synthesis. So, I wrote in my notes here, this is one of the weeks at the Two Reel Cinema Club where I feel I've watched the same film twice. Mm-hmm. These two films are like two ends of the same tunnel. One is about the beginning of a variety show institution, and the other is about a fictionalized end of a different one. One is looking at the future, one is gazing fondly at the past. Mm-hmm. But I think you alluded to something really interesting that I think, although one seems to be about old people and one seems to be about new people, I think they're actually both about the same people. They're all about people that were born in the 1950s, I think. But one of them is those people born in the 1950s were still young, and they were the kind of the thrusting future.
Yep.
And in the second film, the people who were born in the 1950s are now old and they are looking back. But they are the same people. They are that kind of golden post-war baby boomer generation in both films.
Yeah. I would even say post-vaudevillian. I think there's a lot of vaudeville in both of these films, I think. So it's like new, these films are about new vaudeville. And I think, totally. Yeah. You've got the birth of a TV dynasty versus the death of a radio dynasty.
Yeah.
And those are very clear in both of the films. So they are, did you say like they're opposite ends of the same tunnel? Is that what you said?
Yeah. Two ends of the same tunnel.
Perfectly done. Yeah.
It's even, I read, like, one of them has a producer who's threatening to cast everyone down to oblivion. And then the other one, he's dressed all in black. And the other one has an angel all dressed in white who's promising to lift them up into heaven, isn't it?
Yes.
Although either way, someone is out of the picture. It's just a different place that they're exiting to, isn't it? And they both have the same theme, don't they? They're all about, I would argue they are both stating that there is strength in community. And that's the basic idea.
They're two tiny minor characters. Well, one of them's not so tiny, that I think are important. One in each film. I think Lindsay Lohan is important because for a glimpse, for a moment, for a split second, she's sort of the future of this culture. She's the one who could go on and sing. Ironically, she becomes what? She's a businesswoman in that last scene, a real estate agent, or she's taking care of her mother's
or a paralegal
paperwork.
or something. Quite a store or something.
Yeah, which I think ruins my comment here. But one of my favorite moments in Saturday Night is when Lorne Michaels sees I think it's the director for Milton Berle's show.
Right.
And he's an older guy. He's probably 50s or 60s, and he's sitting in a chair. He's absolutely bored. He derives no joy whatsoever from show business anymore, and he's still doing it. And it's just this tiny glimpse with Lorne Michaels seeing that, like that's the end run of this journey he's on. And I think those two moments are really important because they sort of show you the opposite film in just a glimpse, like. That well-worn director definitely belongs on the Prairie Home Companion set, and Lindsay Lohan and that young energy and that angst and that rawness definitely belong on the Saturday Night set.
That is a great moment, actually, in Saturday Night. I've kind of forgotten about that, but that's a really important character moment, isn't it?
It's 2 seconds. You blink, you miss it.
I have a personal rule, which is I generally hate films which are about making films.
Yeah.
Because they're simply so kind of reductive. It's like you're just trying to disappear between two mirrors. But these films are both films about like other media. It's a film about TV, which is the cousin of cinema, which you invite into your home rather than that you leave your home to visit. Yeah. And the other one is a film about radio, which is like the old friend burbling in the background.
Yeah.
So I would argue that both of these films are about other media, both of which have passed their glory days. I mean, radio sort of has one foot in the grave now, doesn't it? Spotify has killed it. Yeah. At work, we used to listen to the radio all the way through the operating list, and nobody does now. People put a playlist on. Yeah. So there's no adverts, there's no DJ, there's no chat, there's no news on the hour. Yeah. It's just you have this playlist that somebody has chosen, and that's what we listen to. I don't know what's happened to DJs. They don't exist. I suppose there's a hole where the DJ used to be, which is now maybe filled by like a YouTube influencer or something like that. But the idea of radio having personality and somebody choosing records for you to listen to, it has sort of disappeared. There's podcasts, but even that isn't radio.
No.
And then on the same way, live TV. I don't know about you, but in this house, we never watch live TV. Everything really will be pre-recorded and it will be streamed, or occasionally if there is football, we might watch that, but that'll be once a year. We do not watch live TV, and it's not really a thing that has any influence anymore.
No.
I remember, when I was doing stand-up, I did do a bit of TV. I did a game show, and I did 3 kind of cakes of cable shows that were taped as live. And there's this thing about recording a show as live, which I've done it for a friend who has a radio show as well, is it does bring a real frisson to the performance because you can't go back and do it again. Yeah. It's going out, with no redos. You got to, so it gives you a little bit of adrenaline. And when you broadcast live, that's even more acute, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's going out to people's TVs or radios, brand new, live this moment. You cannot replay it. You can't do it again. You can't go back.
Yeah.
That's exciting, and that brings something to the performance, and it doesn't exist anymore. Even, you and I, we do this on a Monday night, and then I move things around on the computer, and I make me sound much more intelligent than I really am. But so it's not live. That sort of thing has kind of died. And I think both of these films demonstrate that our culture is a little bit poorer for the death of this kind of live entertainment.
Yeah. It's interesting that both films have a tiny nod to the one element of the liveness, which is censorship. There's a censor on set for Saturday Night, and she's cutting things constantly and saying, you can't say this, you can't say this. And then even on Prairie Home Companion, is it the stage manager, I think, who just keeps an eye on Woody Harrelson's character in particular, that you can't say that, and he's getting all angst-ridden and worried about it. And that's that sort of underscores that liveness, is that you can make mistakes and you can definitely offend people if you're not careful with live entertainment. I just remember that it's in both films, really.
Yep. The mistakes are what make it exciting. Yeah.
I felt like, and I just alluded to this earlier, but at times I felt like Prairie was too smooth, whereas I also found Saturday Night often too erratic. I mean, it kind of needed to be erratic, so that was okay, but it was, as I said earlier, it kind of made me nauseous at times just following things. But Prairie Home Companion almost felt too produced somehow. Like the musical scenes were great, but they lose some of that vitality of live radio by being so well rehearsed and so smooth.
Yeah. Yep.
And they're different. I mean, I think, Prairie Home is Prairie Home Companion it's not an ambitious film. It doesn't go out of its way to be, edgy in any way or trying to be a big film. And Saturday Night it's sort of all about ambition in its very earliest stages. Like all those guys want to be huge. They want to be Milton Berle or Johnny Carson, and those characters are put out there as something to, aim towards. And Prairie Home Companion is just calm, not ambitious. It just happens.
Cozy is the word, isn't it? It's cozy.
Yeah, it is. It's a very cozy film.
And sometimes cozy is just what you need.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed watching both. I can't say a lot of bad things about either film because they're just impossible to feel that way about. I think it's just they're nice films. I'm glad we watched them, and they're like very similar, but at the same time super different. And
they are an excellent double bill. Yeah, really good. Uncannily good, actually. Yeah. If anybody's got the opportunity listening, watch these films back to back. They make a great.
Yeah. I think, I watched one night and the other the next night. It was just like that. It was perfect. It's a great way to see them.
Well, we just have time to talk about what else we might pair up on a double bill. What else has been playing at this theatre?
I struggle. I don't. It's kind of a crazy couple of weeks. The only thing I remember watching outside of the two films was a documentary on public television, a Nova episode on stormy planets, like our solar system, but going to look at different planets and what storms are like on other planets.
Very educational.
Yeah, it was very different from anything else I watched in the week. But yeah, I mean, I just did not see a whole lot. Did you see something more interesting than edutainment, educational television?
Well, I saw two films about storms, weirdly.
Oh,
we've had this is synchronicity.
Yeah.
I've had a kind of like a weird mini personal Two Real Cinema Club this week. We went away for a few days to the coast. To a little cottage on the south coast, and watched a couple of films. We watched The Day After Tomorrow.
Oh yeah,
which is the Roland Emmerich film from 2004. Which is it's one of those films that they don't really make anymore. It's a non-franchise adventure movie.
Yeah,
people don't really make those anymore. It's another one of those films where Roland Emmerich destroys the world. He's kind of just made a series of these films where he destroys the world in one way or another. In this case, he destroys it with bad weather. Yeah. But it's all right because at the end of the film, I think millions and millions of people have died, but Jake Gyllenhaal has got a new girlfriend, so it's all right. And then after we watched that, we watched Weathering with You. Which is a 2019 Japanese anime film directed by Makoto Shinkai, which is also all about storms, in which basically the hero, the decisions he makes means that he ends up destroying Tokyo, but he gets a girlfriend, so it's all right.
Oh, nice.
So they both kind of have that same theme. Weathering with You, so animated film, full of surprises, crazy story leaps, kind of goes all over the place. Great fun, full of these very powerful emotions. So really good fun, but strangely congruent. So we have watched three things about storms in one form or another this week.
Well,
there's got to be something in the air.
Stormy times here at the Two Real Cinema Club, clearly.
They are
appropriate for the world at this time.
Just time to talk about the socials on Instagram, which still exists, I think. We are at Two Real Cinema Club. Read the blog at tworealcinemaclub.com. Comment on our YouTube channel or email us because we love your emails.
Please.
tworealcinemaclub@gmail.com. Next time. So I'm happy to say this week you chose the films and it was fantastic and I loved both of them.
Oh, good.
Happily, next time you've chosen the films again. What are we watching?
We're going to watch A Different Man, which had a short theatrical run in my neighborhood, and then it disappeared, but it is re-emerging. Maybe it's going to be like A Different Man. It's going to be at the Portland Museum of Art, so it's up the street. I'm going to go check that out. And then we're also going to watch, oh boy, it must be from 1981 or 82, The Return of Martin Guerre, which is a French film with Gérard Depardieu.
Yes, another recently cancelled figure.
Yeah.
There's a pattern forming, isn't there?
I guess we're going to uncancel him for one day.
Give him temporary membership to the Two Reel Cinema Club.
Because I'm sure
it's funny. It does make me realise, just watching Saturday Night, the sheer egos on display. It's kind of not a surprise to learn that so many of these people who were big figures in the 1970s world of comedy turned out to be quite problematic people.
Yeah, good point.
So, it turns out, God, pretty much everybody from most forms of media from the last 50 years have been quite problematic people. So let's explore another one of them next week.
Yeah,
fantastic. We'll be at the Popcorn Counter next week, talking about something, I think.
Or listening to something. I don't know.
Listening to something.
Yeah,
listening for something. And then back with a different man in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah,
so thank you for joining us, as always. Join us at the Popcorn Counter next week. And we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.